As Christopher Nolan's latest film, Tenet will find most introductions unnecessary. Released right in the middle of the COVID pandemic, Tenet aimed not only to quench the thirst for the theatrical cinematic experience for the confined moviegoers, but also to bring back the magic of cinema as the supreme, the most sophisticated and intense entertainment product available to mankind. And Tenet succeeds at that to a degree by offering a skillful combination of slick physical action and intriguing conceptual complexity that demands an unorthodox apprehension of the story. By forcing its spectators to drop the linear perception of time, with the conflation in simultaneous fashion of differently oriented timelines, Tenet is bound to entice viewers that have cherished films like Arrival, Looper, Predestination, Coherence, or Primer, to cite a few examples in the same genre. Tenet nevertheless strays from these titles, not just because of its incomparable larger budget and production scale, but mainly from the pace and action that underlie its cinematic offer and determine its wholly different nature. As of today, plentiful film viewers openly declare Tenet to be a film masterpiece and the latest validation of Christopher Nolan as a cinematic genius, for some, a director without comparison in the industry. In filmmaking, a gifted director will, from a knowledgeable standpoint, get associated with an understanding of cinema at its most profound, most riveting and ultimate essence, and such characterization demands a perfect command of film language and craft, a sense of purpose in every movement to craft a coherent symphony that is consistently superlative in all its modes and tempos. The purpose of this essay is to put forth questions which shall be mostly directed towards Tenet's visual lexicon and what can be reasonably deduced from it, whilst providing alternate and sometimes diametrically opposed examples of a cinematic language to provide to each viewer, regardless of his film knowledge, the tools required to assess Tenet in relation to film history. It is hoped that this query will at least supply adequate material for a more informed debate on Tenet and Nolan's filmography by extension. Christopher Nolan is a talented director, and although box office success may not be the most decisive or adequate evidence for a director's ability, Nolan has established his expertise as a consummate filmmaker beyond ticket sales, through a set of features that are now staples of his cinematic output, such as impressive, impeccably crafted, creative and tense action scenes, composite and intricate polyphonic narratives, dynamic visuals, and bustling cinematography, being regularly assisted by iconic and grandiose soundtracks. All of these qualities are naturally present in Tenet as one would expect, while at the same time, some dissenting opinions highlighted issues such as the hammy dialogue, the large swaths of exposition, and characters who could have benefited from additional dramatic or emotional depth. Regardless of what some reviewers consider to be the less fortunate accomplishments of Tenet in these departments, one shall seek to reflect on the results adduced by its formal packaging. How does Nolan's understanding of cinema translate through Tenet's visual construction and aesthetical attire? Does his film syntax reflect a conscientious command of cinematic language, when spectacularity is stripped away and the story is brought to more ordinary, low-key moments? Is there a purpose to be found in each shot and in the form in which it is conveyed? Does his style reinforce and facilitate the articulation of his ideas, or does it sometimes obfuscate or end up decreasing the effect intended to heighten? Is that style something that singles out the director from his peers, or which confines him comfortably within the medium? A foray into the matter constituting this line of questioning is henceforth pursued, which hopefully will inspire viewers to answer those questions on their own if so desired. The first point of interest pertains to how certain actions are manifested and its implications for the apprehension of the audience. For instance, one may consider a simple, everyday operation such as sitting on a chair. During a dialogue, for example, is it meaningful to interrupt a visual continuity in order to display an action that was perceived or made apparent in the preceding shot? Considering that a subject sitting has no lines in that specific moment, and that the shot itself is of such brief duration, does such insertion substantially enrich the scene? Alternatively, consider the reverse example, such as when during a dialogue, the shot features a character sitting down, which is then cut to show the opposite person watching the character sitting, only to then return to the character that has now sat. Has the montage aided the plot or emphasized a specific point worth noting? Has the viewer obtained any crucial information or attained any insight or new perspective through this additional cell? In filmmaking, such cuts may allow a director to follow up, for example, with a segment from a different take of the same scene that might have had a better performance, or to continue the scene with a differently framed shot. Nevertheless, one should ponder on how does such process of cutting and pacing influence the nature and flow of the scene and of film in general, and by extension, it is also useful to bear in mind the power harnessed and showcased by actors in scenes that are uninterrupted, and what effect such cross-cutting has on the audience's understanding of their dramatic portrayal and the exhibition of the sustained pathos that lies at the core of such performances. Do refer to the previous essay on the sequence shot technique for a more in-depth exploration of the characteristics underlying continuous takes, using an example from The Suspended Step of the Stork, a film by the masterful Greek filmmaker Theo Angelopoulos. Let us now observe how the presentation and interaction with an object is partitioned in a variety of shots and what questions may emerge from it. By reflecting on the shot distribution as opposed to what would have been a much simpler depiction of an unbroken sequence comprising the object's appearance, contacts and use, one may now muse over some interesting points. For example, does such an approach elevate and distance the work of the more commonplace creations, or does it place the film amongst conventional practice? Also, what is earned by producing this visual multiplicity in quick succession that might not have been obtained as well by preserving its whole design? Or perhaps more incisively, what is lost once a continuous act is broken down into different visual pieces? Does the effect of montage outweigh the effect of continuity in scenes of this nature? It is a thought-provoking and fruitful exercise to compare this example with others of the same genre in which the visual continuity has been preserved and to contemplate their diverse characteristics and alternate qualities. In Tenet, viewers find a cinematography that is indisputably qualified, and no doubt credit is due as well to Hoyte van Hoytema's talent as a cinematographer and the rewarding, proficient partnership with Nolan. In most conversation pieces, the cinematography relies on subtle inward dolly movements towards the participating characters, and in theory this technique aims to draw the spectator into the scene and bring them physically, as well as emotionally, closer to the characters and their dialogue. However, when one proceeds to employ such technique, whilst still maintaining the conventional shot-reverse shot dynamic, is the effect of the movement fully consummated? If there's dolly motion in one shot and stillness in the reverse shot, does this contrast between movement and inertia benefit or hinder the intent of the cinematography? Can one say that the purpose of the camera flow and the shot has been safeguarded, regardless of the interruption within its structure? In film history, there are plentiful examples of experimental and avant-garde directors that have startled the audiences in emblematic fashion by employing offbeat and apparently incoherent devices in an attempt to deliberately shock viewers and awaken from their cinematic slumber. But is that a facet one is willing to attribute to Tenet's offer? Or is it perhaps more likely that the film followed a conventional device that has proven its utility and success in so many occasions? On another note, cinematic creations abundantly tend to rely on montage as the backbone of the product, being in fact taken by most filmmakers to be the foundational scheme that ought to support the art of filmmaking. Montage is undoubtedly valid and quite a valuable film technique that may yield empowerment, clarification, drive, or effectively constitute the means to transcend the immediate perception with previously unseen associations, as Eisenstein so vividly and eloquently describes in his seminal film essays. However, it can also shackle and undermine if left unchecked and trusted blindly and made the absolute monarch of a work. With montage, not only do countless continuity problems arise at every moment, but it can easily persuade one to turn over to it needlessly at the expense of the purity and impetus of continuity. Oftentimes, an overdependence on montage can lead to results that end up working against the integrity of the work due to its redundant nature. In relation to this matter, examine the insertion of reverse shots that offer no reaction or information concerning the facing character. If the facing character in a dialogue remains unchanged in his countenance and psychological state, is the narrative or the mood enhanced by displaying in separate fashion what has been established already? Does the shot repetition amidst the dialogue serve a vital purpose, or is there the risk of incurring in visual superfluity? It should be noted that repetition in itself is no flaw, but it merely depends on the context and purpose of its application, and it can in fact be highly advantageous in asserting or bolstering certain features, and therefore to evoke a specific response in the viewer. This is just a small set of questions directed at Tenet in an attempt to develop a more encompassing interaction with the work, and some of the layers that are often overlooked in most conversations versing the film's components, whose natural propensity is to focus on the plot and its puzzling architecture. Tenet, as a film deserving of multiple viewings, can only benefit from an investigation at not only its major, overarching aspects, but also at its most inconspicuous and subtle characteristics, if it is to be regarded as extensively apprehended by any viewer. Whilst acknowledging the features of Tenet's visual framework, it's assuredly illuminating to acquaint oneself also with contrasting instances of the filmmaking grammar and learn about their qualities. Take for example Antonioni's great cinematic achievement, unofficially known as the Incommunicability Trilogy, comprising La Ventura, La Notte, and L'Eclisse. In his entire career, but especially in this trilogy, Michelangelo Antonioni resoundingly displayed an utter control and management of his unique cinematic vocabulary, hence establishing his name as one of the finest film directors in history. It is no doubt enthralling to witness, for example, how Antonioni occasionally framed his dialogues, whether in metonymical open landscapes or tight interiors, without giving in to the temptation of montage to show reaction shots of all its intervening characters, lending a disquieting aura of mystery and uncertainty to his complex depictions of relationships marred in existential anguish, which find the most terrifying development in the brutal honesty and disconcerting emotional deluge in Ingmar Bergman's dramas. Many of his two shots bravely enclose characters with their backs consistently turned to the viewer, even when they are actively engaged in conversation, and will freely frame these very subjects in unconventional fashion in order to evoke unexpected emotional responses. Despite having both characters facing the same direction on occasional circumstances, the shot integrity remains without resorting to medium shots of the character that is furthest away. Also, when the focus lies in objects or hands, there is an appreciation of the surrounding space that allows the visual capture of the item and its handling to occur in consonance with the environment and related subjects, while the actions that are easily inferred require no concrete visual referral, therefore yielding no disruption in the visual flow. These are all examples of a cinematic lexicon that may seem unusual, perhaps even strange from a contemporary standpoint, but which are equally valid and with their own appeal and consequences. Evidently, Michelangelo Antonioni and Christopher Nolan are highly contrasting artists, if not just for the simple fact that their aims as filmmakers diverge substantially. One hopes nevertheless that this juxtaposition will not have only furnished a means of perceiving Nolan's language in a broader perspective that will allow each viewer to bring his work under a more cogent light, but perhaps also this inquiry may have kindled the curiosity to explore Antonioni's filmography, which shall wholly enrich every cinephile's understanding of cinema and its various idioms, and to cherish alternate filmmaking styles that do not get the same level of attention and popularity among the general public. Feel free to explore more of this channel's film content, exploring the entire spectrum of cinema from every era and all places. Thank you for listening and see you next time.